Good evening, everybody. It's great to be back. I'm just going to give you a few words about the situation in the Middle East in 1942. The situation was that over here was a deep water supply base for the Axis countries, that is Germany and Italy. They were there, Western Libya. We had unfortunately just lost our deep sea base, supply base there, and have been forced back to Alamein. But although that was a retreat, we had a sort of clever thing up our sleeves, because we had two bases, a big naval presence, and also airstrips over here in Malta, which is one of the main reasons that Malta was besieged and absolutely suffered dreadfully during the war. Okay, now, what were the conditions like in the desert? Absolutely dreadful. If you think about it, all this is desert. So you had hundreds and hundreds of miles of flat, featureless desert, and also lots of storms and so on, dust storms, sandstorms. During the day, you had extreme heat, and at night, you had extreme cold. So it's a terrible situation that way. Also, the diet was very poor. It was basically bully beat and everything that was pre-packed and so on. And water, this was the most important thing, was severely rationed. You, in this terrible heat, were allowed only 1 pint of water a day. It was even more precious than petrol. In addition to all that, disease, sores, and insect bites were absolutely prevalent everywhere. So why all this fuss about protecting this area? The main thing was that anybody who had supremacy in the Mediterranean had control over the shipping. Control over the shipping meant control over supplies, and most importantly, control over the Suez Canal, which was sort of the gateway to the Persian oil fields. The front line, the new front line, was set for Alamein. It ran from the Mediterranean coast, from Alamein, down to that big blobby bit there called the Qattara Depression. This was a huge great swamp, and it was virtually impossible for tanks and any sort of equipment, bad enough on foot, but if you were talking about anything with wheels, forget it. Now, this was actually quite a good place to put a front line, because it was only 40 miles deep, so it meant that you didn't need a huge, great army to protect it. Now, the first battle, there were two battles of Alamein. The first one started on the 1st of July. What it did was, in fact, the only positive thing that it did was to prevent Rommel going further over into Cairo and beyond. But it was a sort of seesaw battle. Few yards gained, few yards lost. So after 3 weeks of attritional fighting, nobody really gained anything. Certainly there's a huge loss of life and an enormous loss of equipment. And after 3 weeks, on the 27th of July, everybody was completely exhausted, and the battle simply fizzled out. So that was the end of that one. The commanders, well, what happened then was that both sides dug in. Rommel got him back. Rommel was there. Desert Fox, of course, he was so short of fuel and short of supplies. That was mainly because of airstrikes and things like that by the Allies' forces. Montgomery had been, he replaced Auchinleck, the previous commander, because Churchill had sort of lost a lot of faith with Auchinleck because of previous battles. Monty was a different kettle of fish altogether. He was determined to improve the morale of his troops, and his statement was that he was going to knock Rommel for 6 and out of Africa. It was very, very popular with the troops, and it boosted the morale greatly. So that was a good thing. Now, the German minefields were a huge, great problem. In the area, there was something like 500,000 miles had been laid. Now, the infantry would have to lead the attack to clear paths through the minefields for vehicles and tanks. We've actually got a minefield detector here that you can look at afterwards. It's not working. A batch of something like 500 mine detectors were shipped to Britain. Now I'm going to let Tom tell you a bit more because I've done the easy bits.
The story of the Second Battle of Alamein is very well known, but what we're going to concentrate on tonight is the part that Bill Sutherland played in that, and Serena will tell us all about that. But basically, Montgomery had been planning this for a long time, and he had fought in the First World War, so he knew the advantages of artillery, and he also wanted to make sure that he had overwhelming strength in terms of the numbers of infantry and the number of tanks and number of guns compared with the Axis powers. And by October, he had amassed about 200,000 infantry, over 1,000 tanks, and over 1,000 artillery guns. So the plan was to open the battle with an artillery barrage, which would fire onto recognized map coordinates. The gunners could not see their target because they were several miles from the target. They could not see the targets, but they could range and aim to specific points all the way along the front. And for the first 20 minutes of the barrage, which started at 20 to 10, these guns fired as many shells as they possibly could. And the idea was to keep the Germans pinned down and take out as much of their artillery as possible. Now, after 20 minutes, the plan was that the guns would then be firing at designated aimed targets, but they couldn't see the target. So they relied on forward observers who would relay back where the shells were landing, and they would be told left a bit, right a bit, or whatever. Now, the difficulty was getting that information back to the guns reliably. Now, one way was field telephones. So the forward observers would trail a telephone wire behind them as they went out. But of course, they came under fire as well, and the telephone lines were blown to bits. So wireless was very, very important. And Bill Sutherland's task was control of the wireless network. And we'll hear a bit more about that. Now, Bill was part of the 51st Highland Division, and they were just one part of an enormous array of infantry. So where was the 51st Highland Division? This is a map from Winston Churchill's book about the Second World War, and this is the frontier from the Qattara Depression up to the coast of the Mediterranean. And the 51st Highland Division were up near the north end of this, there, in fact, with the Australians on their right and the New Zealanders on their left. They'd been training for weeks with both these groups, so they knew each other and they knew what they were doing. The plan was to clear a path through the minefield westwards, and to avoid this feature known as Kidney Ridge. Goodness knows why it was called that, because it was actually a hole. It wasn't a ridge, it was a depression, and it was to be avoided. So they were to go to the north of Kidney Ridge, and the New Zealanders were to go to the south. It was noticed then that there was an enemy artillery observation post on high ground up about here, about the Sea of October there. So they were directed to attack northwards, to head northwards instead of west, and to take out that observation post, which they did. The enemy attacked very vehemently, of course, and tried to get it back because it was vital to be able to observe where the shot was falling. And the clearance of the mines took far, far longer than was planned. There were far more mines, and the depth of the minefield was about 5 miles. Now just think about it, if you were to crawl on your stomach with one of these mine detectors for 5 miles clearing mines, it's going to take a long, long time. So eventually the breakout came on November the 2nd. So that was, 9 days after they'd started. It was a very fierce battle, but this was the turning of the tide, in fact, in the Second World War. The victory was the first victory for the Allies, the first of many. And we'd like to think that it was due in part to the bravery of Bill Sutherland, and we're very pleased to present this lecture here tonight in his memory. I'm now going to hand over to his grandniece, Serena, who's going to tell you about Bill's biography.
Bill was born on 4th September 1919. He was the 5th of 8 children born to Tina Leslie and James Sutherland in their first 10 years of marriage. My granddad, Captain Robbie Sutherland, was the last of those 8 children to come along, and he was born in 1924, so he was about 5 years younger than Bill. Their father was a successful and respected coal merchant in Stromness, in the days when every home had a hearth. Bill was born at the family home Alquist in Graham Place, Stromness. I've taken most of my information from Grandad's book, Will Your Anchor Hold? So Grandad described Alquist as a small, warm house with substantial walls, 4 main rooms, a toilet, box room and attic. Grandad says, during my early days, the boys' bedroom had 2 beds, a dresser and a wardrobe. 3 boys slept in one bed and 2 in the other. Bill himself said, no matter how crowded we were, the house was popular with our pals, girls and boys and visitors. Mother made everyone welcome at Alquist. Tinker, tailor, soldier, sailor, from all walks of life they came. There was always plenty of food on the table for the large family and visitors alike. Like his siblings, Bill enjoyed an active and seafaring childhood and was a regatta competitor by the age of 13. Sailing over to Hoy on a bonny day or going fishing down the Flow were common summer events. Fishing off the piers when the weather was not so good and helping with milk deliveries around Stromness were other activities the family were involved in. Bill recalls that our parents provided us with every conceivable aid to manhood, including boxing gloves, punch bag and a whole loft available for the purpose. Bill joined the post office as a messenger boy at age 14 and a half. He was promoted to sorter, clerk and telegraphist at the post office head office in Kirkwall. He cycled the 15 miles back to Stromness every weekend. By that time he was used to physical labour, having helped out in the family coal business from a young age, as well as all the physical activity done for fun in those days. He also took part in boxing bouts as part of the summer festivities in Orkney, and both he and his brother Leslie were known for their physical strength and prowess. Bill joined the Territorial Army, the Orkney Fortress Royal Engineers, and was called up in August 1939. Bill was posted first to Ness Battery and then to Flotta. Bill said, "It was non-conformity at Ness Battery that ensured I was banished to Sangerhead, Flotta, to become a searchlight operator on one of the 3 searchlights. As the war went on, he was transferred to Bury. Thanks to the Kirkwall Post Office, he was already trained in the mode of CW signalling. In early 1940, Bill was posted to the 9th Highland Division Signals at Crieff. On 4th July 1942, Bill sailed from the UK with the 51st Highland Division. This was the same day that his elder brother Johnny was killed when the SS Iron Crown was torpedoed by the Japanese some 30 miles off the coast of Australia. A great loss to all the family, as well as the Australian fiancée that Johnny had. Bill and the rest of the 5th 51st Highland Division spent time training with the Australians before heading to battle on 23rd October 1942. Bill's role was to be in control of the wireless network. I'm now going to read from Bill's account of the battle, which is in my granddad's book. I think he says it best himself. Captain Grant Murray of the Seaforth, patrolling the start line, saw the attack forming up. As zero drew near, I twisted round and looked back towards our own lines. Suddenly, the whole horizon went pink, and for a second or two, there was perfect silence. Then the mass of 8th Army guns hit as in a wall of stun that made the whole earth shake. Through the din, the whine of shells overhead, the clatter of machine gun, and eventually the pipes. Then we saw the sight that will forever live in our memories. Line upon line of steel-helmeted figures, rifles at the high post, bayonets catching in the moonlight, and over all, the wailing of the pipes. As they passed, they gave us the thumbs-up sign as we watched them plod on towards the enemy lines shrouded in smoke, the enemy defensive fire falling among them. 5th Black Watch crossed the line at 21:50 with pipes playing, passed straight through the minefield. It was not long before they met opposition and men began to fall. 19-year-old piper Duncan McIntyre, hit twice, played as he died. A third hit brought him to the ground. When his body was found, the bag was still in his oxter and his fingers still on the chanter. The rigours of such a campaign had to be experienced to be believed. However, I was as big as the task which came my way. My cultivated toughness was to stand me in good stead and keep me on my feet when otherwise I would have collapsed. I was conditioned to be stronger in order to carry heavier loads, and as a hand-picked muscle man, my earlier task was to dig in the brigade's amenities behind Alamein. I was a dried-out 13 stone, every ounce of surplus flesh went down the sweat pans of the desert. I was therefore elated with my detached assignment to the 5th Battalion Seaforth Highlanders. With this battalion, I moved forward to El Alamein and very soon became the CO's right hand. I was left-handed. We became firm buddies. In Slitch Trench or Bren gun carrier, I was not to fail him. The obsolete wireless equipment was no match for the frequencies crowded out with high-powered Morse signals, and the ones I had to tail were invariably blasted to a whisper, but I cottoned on to a message with Scotch terrier tenacity. In the language of Morse, I never let go, and maintained their contact with the outside world. After all, it was all they had. Lines were knocked out quicker than they could be laid. The hell around me mattered not. This was my duty, devotion to my fellow man, and whichever part of their lives was in my hands, I had to muster all my strength to help them. I would hold on at any price for their lives' sake. I was the only link when all other lines to the rear were out, and I was always open for this mighty important business. Tiring, but the job had to be done. I enjoyed marvellous physical well-being in spite of all privations and adversities for which I was thankful to God. When it seemed that I was to lose my battle to keep open the link, in the heat of the Mireth Line massacre, the heat dwelling truly on, and the only hope left for my lifelink was to fetch up 2 more batteries. By the time I made my mission, my arms almost hung off, but there was to be no respite and no relief. I was well and truly on my own. Nevertheless, I got through and once more opened for business. Might man I certainly was, and that was really how I won the military medal. So that's Bill's own account of what happened. All we can do is try and imagine the circumstances which Bill found himself in during the battle, in the heat and sand of the desert so far from his Orkney home. Bill managed to keep his radio going for 48 hours. When his radio ran out of battery, Bill ran to get 2 more and carried these back to his position. One of the batteries Bill was carrying was hit by a bullet. In the Pressing Journal, Special Correspondent Claire Hollingworth from Cairo said, "Signalman Bill Sutherland, Orkney, has been awarded the military medal. When I read this citation, I felt his outstanding actions show far greater bravery and more continuous effort to do his duty than deeds for which military medals are often awarded." Throughout 48 hours of heavy and continuous shelling, Sutherland kept his wireless set in action in an open anti-tank ditch in which his battalion HQ was sited. To do so, he exposed himself with complete disregard for his own safety. When his radio batteries were running low, he went on foot 700 yards through a minefield gap on which the enemy were directing heavy and accurate fire. He brought up 2 batteries, one of which was hit by a bullet as he carried it. Through these efforts, wireless touch was maintained with the brigade when all other lines to the rear were cut, and it was the only means of obtaining artillery support to stop the enemy counter-attack. So I think we have that piece from the paper there, and then a letter from King George. Taking part in an ultimately victorious battle and winning the military medal, of course, did not excuse Bill from continuing with his division as the war carried on. Bill said, "There was still a long trail a-winding to the land of my dreams. We still had to push our foes out of Tripoli, Tunisia, and then on to Sicily. On capturing Sicily, General Montgomery informed us that we were returned to the UK to prepare for an even greater battle. At that moment, the return home was all we wanted to hear." Bill returned to the UK for a period of training and some precious R&R before returning to combat, landing in France on D-Day. He was on special duty with an RAF pilot, a truck, a driver and his wireless equipment to report the pilot's advice to his masters about where to bomb. They moved through France and into Belgium. In 1944, Bill was hospitalised with diphtheria, which gave him the opportunity to go back to his drawing, which he had done since he was a boy. So we have a drawing here that Bill did. He remained in the army until after the war. Bill was a great character, and Grandad described him as having very little inclination to accept unnecessary discipline, which resulted in him getting in trouble with his superiors on occasion, including when he was transferred to Flotta at the start of his military career. The potential for an even worse punishment came his way when he was charged with desertion after going AWOL in Belgium for a week after making his way there following the D-Day landing. Grandad, who was no stranger to bad behaviour himself at one time, recalls that, in lovely weather, the Belgian girls were delirious and tempting the boys with wine. Bill imbibed and was drunk for a week. His history in battle and his performance otherwise meant he got away with a reprimand and returned to his unit, for which his family were very grateful. So I'll hand over to Mr. Firth for a talk about the wireless equipment.
Now the number 18 set, and there's the remains of one part standing there from Orkney Wireless Museum. We actually have 2, but the other one's in even worse condition than that, because they are not young, and at the end of the war they were in big demand by radio hams, because they are beautiful sets, simple, straightforward, plain, no fancy bits about them. It was designed for operation from 6 to 9 megahertz. In amateur radio parlance, that's 50 metres to 33.3 metres. And it's well designed, and it's in a steel man pack. It's in a steel box, which is waterproof canopy, has a waterproof canopy for over the top for rain. It's a backpack, and it had its own battery container in the bottom. But when I knew them in the 1950s, we generally used a 12-volt battery, an Army 12-volt battery, and fed it outside, because the wee batteries tended to go flat very quickly. So we used standard lead-acid accumulators as an external power. The controls are straightforward and can be used for voice or Morse. An added feature is for close-range operation. It is a very simple aerial system. There's a 16-foot one lying in front of the platform here. And it simply is a lot of equal length tubes which fit into each other, and a single wire running right down the middle, rather like the disabled walking sticks you get. You give them a shake, they sort of come together. And that one went together tonight, and I do not know how many years it is since it was last assembled. And it can be mounted on the side of the back for convenience, for being used in a mobile position. The Morse key can be strapped onto it and used. Morse key sitting on top, and generally these Morse keys had straps to go around your leg, because if you're in an observation post, the one thing you don't have is a table. You're moving about, and the Morse keys slapped onto your leg. The convenience is a great thing, and in Morse, when it's used in action, is much clearer, and it gets through all the hash and the rubbish that's coming through, because all sort of things can go wrong when you're trying to transmit. And Bill was a past master in Morse from his post office training. So that was him in action. My knowledge of the battle stems from the fact that during my national service, I was in Egypt and I trained as an observation post wireless operator, and we used old 18 sets to train on, smashing things. And we had a driver, Geordie Foster, and he was a great man for a yard. And we'd get him onto it. Now, he'd been at the Battle of El Alamein as an observation post driver. And it was him who first told us about a yoke target. A yoke target is a target where the entire army is involved. That was the 8th Army that was involved in it. And the bit about a yoke target is it's spontaneous, and every single heavy gun starts in the same instant. It's controlled by wireless. And the call for it is yoke target, yoke target, yoke target. And you stand back because hell is let loose. Everything opens up. And this is what happened there. He said that it was quite unbelievable, the noise and the devastation, because of course they're firing in soft sand and the dust was everywhere. The second time he heard it, that same signal, was at the crossing of the Rhine. Apparently they used one there as well. I understand there was a third yoke target, but I have not got confirmation of it. But those were definitely two. The other machine, which features in our story, and bits about it have been mentioned, is the portable mine detector. And it's worth a wee mention, because it was designed by a Polish officer, Joseph Stanislaw Kasulci, who perfected it in the sands at Caterland, south of Stonehaven, where he was stationed after he got out of Poland. He never patented his invention. He offered it instead to the British Army. And for once, they accepted it straight away, and it went straight into production. And the first 500 were immediately shipped to Egypt, because Rommel used mines to perfection, and the German mines were very dangerous. They actually had a pressure plate on the bottom. So if you found a mine, and they were anti-tank mines, the infantry ones were different, this is anti-tank mines, you had to be careful, but the instant you lifted it, there was a pressure plate on the bottom, and it blew up. However, they devised means to get around that, and the use of the mine detector doubled the speed at which they could clear mines. Now, you'll see pictures of them with a 6-foot pole swinging back and forth. Our one doesn't have its 6-foot pole, it's lying down here. It was used by the sappers crawling in the dark with pushing the detector in front of them. They found a mine, a wee cage was put on top of it to mark its position. Remember the desert, I don't know if you've been there, but it's amazing how much light there is from even a dark sky. And if you were careful, you could do, they did it this way. They, once it had been marked, it was left for the other boys to get it sorted. And they actually cleared paths. Now the path through the minefields was 24 feet wide. It was designed for single traffic with tanks. And the another point I should have mentioned was that when he presented this device, he never patented it. It was for the general use of the Allies. The only thanks he ever got was a personal letter from King George VI thanking him. And it saved a tremendous number of lives and certainly speeded up the war. These things were continued in use, and in actual fact, the British Army stopped using them in 1991 in the Gulf War, so that shows you what a good thing they were. I must also mention that the German mines were anti-tank mines, so when sappers found them, they could crawl over them without exploding them, but they had to mark them, which was one of the big features that led us through the minefield. The barrage was triggered by a yoke target. Everything opened up at once, and he said it was terrifying on our side to hear it, never mind being at the other end. And after a short time, it was stopped and directed fire, and as well as that, the British had a creeping barrage which worked its way across the German lines. This is when Bill suddenly realised, this is going to be going on for days, I need more batteries. So, during it all, he made a dash along a corridor, one of these safe passages, to get his standby batteries, and the one was shot out of his hand. The items that we have are very battered, but please remember they are by no means new, and they are the real thing. Thanks.
He was a big fan of Big Bill Campbell, who's actually a Scot who'd gone out and started making a career as a country and western singer, but this is quite a wild song. So here we go. There's gonna be a hot time in the mountains. Everyone is raring to go. Folks are all excited. They have been invited, dressed up in their blue jeans and palais coats. They'll be coming round the mountain way up there. They'll be cutting didos on their old guitar. Oh, the Martins and the Colls, those mountain girls and boys, swinging at that hillbilly jamboree. Grandpa's in the corner, full of Mountain Dew. Shout and swing your partner till he's black and blue. Catherine, Zeke and Karen, even Sister Sue, Tom, Dick and Harry, and old Granny too. We'll forget their feuds and still when they two-step and quadrille at that low-down, hold-down hillbilly jamboree. Jump bands and the mountains will be there. They will turn the heat on with that old grey mare. They won't give a goodbye starn when they pass around the barn, swinging at that hillbilly jamboree. Uncle has retired, leaning on his crutch. singing, "Oh, Susanna, had one drink too much." Parson Obadiah lays his Bible down, lost his religion on the last going round, when the rooster starts to crow and it's time for all to go. From that low down hillbilly jamboree, from that low down hillbilly jamboree.
So, turn now to the period after the war. Bill returned to Orkney after demobbing, and his interest in weightlifting developed, whilst he spent time living back home in Stromness. Grandad again says in his book that he demobbed back to the islands. He taught himself weightlifting from textbooks. He'd never seen the act performed, but plugged at it and had some nasty knocks in search for know-how. He quickly reached a crude standard of 190 press, 200 snatch and 250 clean and jerk. By 1947 he had reached poundage on a par with Scottish heavyweight championship standards. Bill moved to Staines, which is just outside London, which was in around 1948, and he took up a position there with the post office. Again, this is from Bill's own words. "My continual mobility in the war found me restless, and so I found my way to Staines, Middlesex." Ooh, the anti-develivum, I should have practiced this bit a bit more, hours of business. The ridiculous humdrum nightly balancing as a counter clerk ruled out all hopes in this direction. I had turned my back on the very home of ideal strength building and really sold myself down the line of deterioration. However, in my mind there was no turning back. On my way to Staines, I popped in to meet my brother in Scarborough. While there, the best developed man show in an open strength contest was taking place. George Feathers of Yorkshire fame was entertained by yours truly in the deadlift contest. We went up to 480 pounds, and as he seemed to be nearing his limits, I declined to go further so that I should not steal his thunder. After all, do unto others as you would be done by. He was stripped to his trunks and I was respectfully dressed for the streets. Rather magnanimous. I eventually found a couple of enthusiasts and went to work in a cell-like hut in Staines, and therefore managed to keep my blood cells surging with good, healthy strength. I won the Civil Service Heavyweight Championship in 1951 with 180 press, 190 snatch, 240 jerk. My brother Robbie called by and distracted me by a pub visit in advance of the 1952 show. However, I managed the runner-up badge. I had 2 feats published in the Bodybuilder. The swinging of 2 56-pound blocks held together and swung overhead with either hand, and bending down and picking up a ring 56-pound weight with the other. So this is the Civil Service Heavyweight Championship. In the following years, I was to meet my own crucifixion. Details are better left unsaid, nevertheless the message was the same. I underwent emotional disturbance which made any precious hell of even the war as its worst seem like a heaven on earth. I was robbed of my strength, and as long as it took Delilah to shear Samson, my feelings were well and truly given the squeeze. In Staines, Bill met the love of his life, Joan, and they were together for a number of years. Sadly, Joan was married, although estranged when she and Bill met. Her husband contacted her and told her that as they remained married, she should return to him so they could continue married life together. Bill wrote, "The cruelly unjust man-made laws are indeed a grave, unkind departure from the laws of nature and justice," which, as a solicitor, is a sentiment I and my clients feel often. Bill sought a transfer from Staines after his relationship with Joan ended, and he moved to Whitby in 1957, which was near Scarborough, where his brother Leslie and his wife Betty had made their home. There he continued his fitness pursuits and also took up model making. I've got a few photos here from his bodybuilding and brick swinging days. He worked in the post office in Whitby, without any difficulty until the strike of 1971, which Bill took objection to, and his lack of inclination to accept unnecessary discipline landed him in dispute with the union. He wrote in a letter to the union chief, Tom Jackson, that when it became evident at the branch strike meeting that there would be no deviation from the course of strike action, I voiced my utter dissatisfaction of the circumstances in no uncertain manner, and left the meeting in no doubt whatsoever that I would exercise my rights of freedom of choice, staying my course. In view of my single-mindedness and well-considered determination to go it alone, my way, without fear or favour, I took the only course available to me and resigned the union accordingly, which I would think during the strikes was quite a big deal, controversial position to take. Despite his differences with the union, Bill remained in the post office until he retired in 1973. When Bill retired from the post office, he returned home to Orkney. He worked at the Orkney Fishermen's Society and the Orkney Steam Company. He maintained his interests in fitness, singing, and even took up yodelling. To the amusement of passers-by and his family, he was known to practice his yodelling at Warbeth to the Kai. What they thought of it is not recorded. He also helped my granddad when, in 1975, they restarted the family business of coal merchants in Stromness. He spent his time drawing, often sailing ships, recording his own singing, and putting together a comprehensive family history which Grandad drew on from his books. Some of his weights, fitness mats, and old-fashioned chest expanders were passed to my brother Johnny, and I tried to persuade him to do a demonstration, but he wasn't up for it, which is quite disappointing. Bill retired for a second time in 1984. In retirement, he kept up his hobbies. My memories of Bill are of him and my great-auntie Anna, his oldest sibling, who was widowed by that time, living together in Alquist. He was, when I knew him, a quiet but kindly man. His hearing had deteriorated, and he sat in a corner and watched as Anna provided hospitality for everyone who called in, just as her mother had done all those years ago when Bill was a boy. All were still welcome at Alquist. Bill died of throat cancer in 1995 at the age of 75. He is buried in Stromness. During his life, and particularly during his illness, Grandad recalls that Bill often said, "Walk tall, look the world right in the eye," and that is what he did both in battle and in life.
Oh, and if you want to try a harmony as well, it's a kind of hook, as they say in music. It's lovely. So, here we go. When you stand in the darkness, wait to hear what will be, and the sound of the breakers, though you're far from the sea, and the storm distant rising like the sleet and the rain, and the name will remain Alamein. Hold your course, stand together, let the light be your guide in the force of the weather, with your comrades beside. Though the storm roar around you, press ahead through the rain, and the name will remain Alamein. And we'll always remember when the sky is aglow, when the winds of November bring the rain and the snow, thinking back to the starlight and the sand-swept domain, and the name will remain Alamein. Every tide has a turning, every day has a dawn. Every storm shifts its quarter if you keep pressing on. Then the tide surges forward and you're moving again. And the name will remain Alamein. And I think of a chorus and it's calling to me, when we swept all before us and we searched like the sea, like the tides pouring onward, and I feel it again. And the name will remain Alamein. And we'll always remember when the sky is aglow, when the night, the winds of November bring the rain and the snow. Thinking back to the starlight and the sand swept amain, and the name will remain.